All right. Well, thank you everyone for who's able to join with this and join the event. We're happy that you could be with us today. We're going to be talking about factory relocation. I'm David Collins. I'm the CEO of MTG and CMC. We've been working with a number of companies lately about factory relocation, and we've seen a lot of interest across the board. My expertise in this is I help do a lot of the financial analysis and risk analysis for our clients as they look into relocation. I'm involved in a project doing that right now, and Bob, I'll let you introduce yourself. Bob is one of our partners and has considerable practical expertise in this.
Good morning. As my title says, I'm Bob Mallard. I'm a partner in the company. I have over 45 years of manufacturing and business experience. I'm a Canadian native, but I've lived in China for 22 years, running factories and businesses in China during that period of time. Notably for me, Michelin Tire in Canada and Nova Scotia was one of my bigger and longer term employments other than my own companies. I own two of my own factories in Ontario, Canada. I've opened factories in Mexico, US, and Canada, as well as new ones in China and relocations in China, within China and out of China. As David mentioned, we are currently moving two factories out of China at the moment. We're working on a third one. We're doing a feasibility study for another company. In the past, we've opened companies in China through European companies, et cetera, and then we've relocated and or improved and done a lot of work inside those factories. Our conversation today is on relocation of factories, where we will address some of the questions that came in early. I think, David, you have some more administrative things to explain to people about raising hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you. So for anyone who this is their first time using it, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a little Q and A button. What we're going to do is we have a series of questions. We thank everyone for submitting these. We're going to start with these and then ask for people to, if you have further thoughts or you're looking for some clarification or something to add, either please raise your hand with the little raise your hand button, or put the question in the Q&A, which is below. And we will try to answer as many of those as we can. Now, if you can see, we actually got more questions than I think we'll be able to completely cover in this meeting. So I'd like that if there's something else you want to discuss further, you can reach out to us directly, and we will also try to answer all these afterwards through a blog post or something similar. So if they're without any further questions, Bob, you want to start with our first one?
Sure. Read out the first question so everybody knows what we're talking, please.
Yes, of course. Here, I'm gonna I'll share my screen and then we will
There you go.
All right. First question that's been the most popular and really covers a lot of the other ones is, what is the most commonly seen issue in shifting manufacturing locations, both within China and out of China?
What I did on this one is I pulled my own staff as well as my experience. Like I've mentioned, we have a lot of staff that have a lot of experience in opening and moving factories and starting new factories and shifting. The biggest single issue is underestimation. Most of our clients and people that I know and work I've done in the past, they underestimate how much effort it takes and planning it takes to move a factory, especially out of China and to another location. So to me, that there's more than just one answer to this, but that would be the number one issue. And the reason for that is a lot of companies that we deal with, they believe they understand their process and their equipment better, so they don't feel a need to understand that they don't see the need, I should say, that they do need help. And the reason they do need help is, first of all, yeah, you got to start out with basically a scope. What do you want to do? What do you want to change? This is a great opportunity to improve things, change things, modernize things, etc. The second thing is then once you do that is a good feasibility study. What are the true costs? And when you get into it and start moving equipment, I mean, if you move from China to the US and Canada, which we're doing now for a client, all the motors and the valves and everything in there, and I'm not going to get too far into details, but all of that is a cost, and it needs to be done. And you have to be CSA and UL approved and safety and all of these things. It's all different from China to here in North America, and that includes Mexico. The third thing to me is the planning. You need a team, a cross-functional team, people who understand all the aspects. Because when you're opening a facility, you're talking about environmental, you're talking about electrical, even construction of a building. I mean, we've gone into several companies where the floor was just too weak. We had to take we went in later and had to help them and take all the equipment out, tear the floor up and redo it, and including putting in special pads for CNC equipment, for metal stamping, for large plastic injection molders, because the harmonics is just can throw everything off if you don't do that. So having individuals who understand from A to B to C to D to E through Z is very important. And a lot of companies underestimate that they have that in their own company, and they don't have it actually. And it doesn't just stop there. It includes HR, human resources, the planning, the contracts, unions, et cetera. It's very deep. And when you're leaving a place like China, you have obligations in China to close contracts and pay off people, et cetera. So it's a big deal. So to us, it's not just one answer. It's a multitude of things, but the top three would be underestimating or overestimating what you can do yourselves. Two is doing a good study, good feasibility study, which would include current state, all the documentation and layouts and value stream maps, et cetera, that you would need. And then looking at the opportunity for what you could gain by moving to a new location. One client, we had a factory in China, was 1,200 employees running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've moved it to another location in North America, and we brought it down to 450 people. Now we introduced some robotics, we introduced a lot of technology, but that was the drive. You know, we could do many different things if people could do many different things. If they just sit back, get a cross-functional team, which is very important. A project leader who could really run a project is critical. You know, you want to be able to control the RASI and the timelines and et cetera. There's project planning software out there. We have our own that we use, and it's quite good. There's the three main things I think you got to worry about. And it's just goes well beyond that, because there's a multitude of tasks. I had one client come to me who was moving in China to another location. He gave me his move plan. It was 27 items. I sat down and wrote half of it up for them to show them, let's look at it differently. And I had 27 pages, and I was only half done. It's totally different. Okay? It's just not. We have a current client says, well, we're just going to move the equipment we have. You've been in and helped us. We can just pick up the equipment and move it to some location in North America. Well, no, you can't. It's not that simple. So we're doing the feasibility study for them right now. I hope that answers your questions. That question.
Yeah, and you know, I think related to that, why don't we jump into one of the ones here we have, you know, about buying equipment, because you said, you know, there are harmonics and all that. Should they go local? Should, you know, what's usually the most advantageous method you found?
Well, I mean, first of all, you got to believe that China's from equipment point of view, has come a long ways. When I first went to China 22 years ago, I brought my $1 million laser over there from the US. I shut down the factory in the US and moved the production to China and brought my $1 million laser. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It was great. But what I found is I could buy, $10,000 lasers and put 2 or 3 of them in place and do the same amount of work. And they were very reliable and accurate. So you have to assess and then judge. I mean, for electrical printed circuits and PCB boards and that, pick and place units and SMT lines, they got some very good ones over there. The prices are better, and they do have global service. So again, it's back to the point on robotics and that, maybe not. Maybe you want to work in North America. I think Europe is very expensive. So you have to really, once again, lay down, do your studies, do your capital expense plan and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? And then determine which. But I would not discount buying equipment from China.
No, but what we have found is, though the equipment is good, you cannot take it on face value.
Right.
If you look at Alibaba and they say we make this and they have the specifications and it looks good, it may be good, but it may not. You really need to follow the producer through the whole process. And
Especially bringing it onshore to North
yes,
America and Europe, because when they say they can do it, they're still talking 380 voltage amps in your motors and stuff like that. You really need to follow the build rate and make sure they do meet everything they say they could meet in the quotations. Yes.
yeah. So, Bob, I'd like to, again, if anyone has any questions, please jump in. Now, what related to that, do you think that, we've talked about this with some of our clients before, but a lot of raw materials and components still are going to come from China as you're in this transition period. How do we account the longer supply chains, and would it translate to higher costs?
Well, I mean, shipping is always higher cost. If you're in China and you're getting your raw material in China, you're doing it on a truck. If you're doing it in North America and still buying from China, now you got to put it on not only a truck but a boat. So the lead times are much longer. The prices shouldn't change that much, but you got to pay for containers, and that makes the price go up. And of course, there's more material in the pipeline, so you're going to have more cash flow issues dealing with the longer pipeline. I would suggest, though, that in a whole package, I'm going to use the term de-risking, which I've noticed lately that the China government has now picked up on it and saying that we in the West are overselling it and overstating it. Well, if you're going to de-risk, and that's your belief, you need to de-risk, then you need to find suppliers and competitive suppliers outside of China, and that should be a goal. If you can't, then you need to really have someone who understands the import-export rules, the duties and customs, and make sure that you're managing the pipeline, the logistics. I hesitated because let's remember what happened a few years ago, especially with COVID. I mean, we had clients that were paying $30,000 to $40,000 a container. Just they were bidding on them to get them. That I'm sure could be qualified in North America somewhere, or in Mexico, or some other place, Vietnam or something. But Taiwan has a good supply base. The prices are pretty good, but again, you still got to put it on a boat. You still got to ship it. So I would, onshoring to North America, I would try my best to find the most economical supplier in North America.
And it's worth noting that the support industries build up around things. So,
Yep.
China didn't suddenly have all this stuff. It had to be built up. When an industry goes there, more tend to be built up. So there is always a transition period, but as more reshoring happens to the United States or to Mexico, Canada, parts of Europe, suppliers and sub-suppliers will build up. And there isn't a chance that some of it will become, it just economically makes sense for it still to be produced in China. But at that point, the product might be something that's fairly commoditized, so it's not as beholden to one supplier as it previously was.
Right.
We just got a question in, Bob. So I'm
Okay.
going to, it's as companies potentially decide to onshore their Chinese factories, should they factor in productivity improvements to offset their higher North American costs in order to maintain profitability?
I would believe that. I mean, I was going to add that to the last one. I mentioned the one company that we were onshoring. They had 1,200 employees. We got it down to 425. But not only that, it was a great improvement in quality, a great improvement in other productivity that really made it beneficial and offset some of the raw material costs or the component costs that they had to buy outside of China, so they can fully de-risk. So yeah, I would believe unless you're sure that you are fully in lean and got continuous improvements and good KPIs and cost and root cause analysis, that you're that lean, I would always believe there's an opportunity for improvement somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, and productivity also, you got to think more broadly with it comes to cost. We've had companies come to us and they said, so we should be moving to Cambodia because that has the lowest cost. It's like, well, maybe, but you have to think, okay, what are the infrastructure costs? What are the supply costs? So just for example, if you're making something that's very energy heavy but not very labor intensive, there are places in North America, particularly Canada, has very low labor costs. I mean, not labor costs, electric costs, and that can offset the higher labor. I remember reading, for example, uh, Iceland has become big in aluminum smelting because that is a very energy intensive process, and energy is essentially free in Iceland. So, something you have to think about. And then, yes, of course, you have to focus on productivity. This kind of goes back to with what Bob had said earlier, is that if you're moving, never miss an opportunity to improve. Don't, if you're moving anywhere, even within China, this is a good opportunity to take what's wrong or what isn't working as well and improve it. We had another client who moved to a cheaper area in China, and they decided not to listen to us about improving their productivity and how they organized their factory, and they just basically exported their problems to a new location and added new ones because they didn't have the labor availability.
And I might add to that particular client, it brought us back in, and we spent almost 2 more years in there getting it to where it should have been. So um, there are always opportunities to improve, and it should be ingrained in the culture. And when you move, it's a great opportunity to get that started right off the top. Teach and train the employees, the management, the supervision in particular on visual management, on Gemba Kaizen, on KPIs and data analysis, root cause analysis. You can't go wrong by doing those things.
So someone had asked us, we're going to just jump around a little on these.
Okay.
Are you seeing Chinese-owned contract manufacturers, especially electronics, expanding outside of China?
I can't say personally that I know that. I don't know if more of my staff did. I mean, I worked in that industry for quite a number of years in China, but the circuit company businesses, you got a lot of a lot of processes that are very not hazardous. Well, they could be hazardous, I guess, but they are very corrosive. You got gold plating, you got etching, you have all these washing. So you still got to worry about environmentals. In a lot of countries, don't want those issues. But I can't say personally right now that I know of a lot of those companies moving out of China. I know some have moved back to Taiwan, but I can't personally say. I don't know if any of our people could answer that question better than I, but we'll do a little research and answer that one again.
Okay. So the other question, I think, what have we seen? So we've seen a lot as people are, they talk about planning, and people are very interested in relocation costs and analysis. So, let's talk about this. What should a company consider cost-wise when moving?
Well, again, right off the top of my head, you got to figure on how, the cost of starting up a business in a new country. I mean, there's licensing, there's environmental laws, there's labor laws. Someone needs to do that. That's where David does a great job in that. He does the analysis of countries, and he does comparison of power and environmental and water, et cetera. The second part is there's going to be, should try to minimize it, but there's going to be a cost in starting up and shutting down and starting up. If you're moving the equipment you have, well, now you got to go through it and say, okay, environmentally, is there anything contagious in there or anything that's another government's not going to like? We already know about the power and valves and standards on US CSA and UL, et cetera. Then there's the cost of dismantling and setting up, but then there's also the interruption of production. If it's a quiet move, in other words, the people in China do not know you're doing this, you may want to consider just buying everything new and installing it and getting up and running, and then slowly shut down the China plant, because you don't want an interruption in your sales and your revenue. The other way to do it is if it's a planned one and an agreed one, you can always build inventory ahead and just take it down piece by piece. I've seen companies shut it down, pick it all up, do all the work they had to do, all the environmentals, et cetera, and move it all one lot stock. But you need a lot of inventory if you can afford the inventory. If you can afford not to have a disruption, then you need to do it something like that. But generally speaking, startup costs in a new country, labor, training, productivity is going to slow to come up. You're not going to hit the same levels immediately. It's going to take time for the new employees to get there. So there's going to be longer and unseen costs, capital operating costs that you need to really plan on.
Absolutely. So, with that in mind, I'd like to answer. So we did have someone ask, other than locations in Asia or reshoring to the US, have you considered locations in other parts of the world, such as Africa, that are growing up economies? And the short answer is yes, of course. But with a couple caveats. These economies are growing, but they often can have a level of complexity that is difficult to deal with at this time, and that's something that you should always take into account. A number of countries in Africa, you have what's called the demographic dividend, a young population, often at least decent, fairly well educated, that is ready to work in these industries. But then you might have problems with infrastructure. Do they have the rail networks, the road networks, the shipping capacity, all the rest of this? It sounds good on paper if, again, you're only using labor costs, but the India is one that comes up a lot. We are seeing a lot more companies look at India, and while there's a lot of capacity there and fairly well educated population, it still is struggling with parts of its infrastructure. That has improved lately, but it also has a very complicated fees and licensing system that can be a real pain to get through. So that that is something to consider. Um, I personally, from my observations, I see Africa as the next frontier, but there's a lot to go over there. We get requests from Nigeria often, but for work there, but it still is struggling on stability issues, a lot making sure there's the right access to capital, ways to get out to the market. And you really also to ask yourself, what am I trying to do? Like if I'm trying to de-risk or take advantage of the new regulations and structures in North America, there are advantages to producing a product in Mexico to serve a US market or a US Canadian market and a expanding market in Mexico. You can be a lot more flexible. You're not dealing with the lead time problems that companies currently have in China. I mean, we've had more than a few clients that their product is made and they only find out there's an issue 6 weeks later after it arrives. Whereas if it's produced in Mexico, you'll know maybe 6 days later, which is a considerable improvement to be able to turn around and make a difference. Which Bob, you're looking at these as well. Which one of these do you think we'd want to cover?
Should we,
Oh, we got a lot of them. We're just jumping around here.
just pick one, it's okay.
Um,
Can I just add to what you said, David, for a minute?
yes, please,
We-
absolutely.
In the past 4 years, we've done a lot of studies on the Middle East. We've done a lot of studies in Europe, looking at Eastern Europe, of course, more so than Western Europe. We were doing a study right now with a company in Panama, looking at Latin America. Before that, we were looking at Haiti, but unfortunately, Haiti is now really off the market because of the climate down there. But yeah, we've looked everywhere, and as David mentioned, power rates in Canada, especially in Quebec, the province of Quebec, but it does bring its other problems like language and et cetera. It's not as bad as in other countries, but it's still there. So we've done a lot of studies around the world to check and see where we're going to go. We've been to Thailand as well, Malaysia, check there. Indonesia, we've looked at it a little bit. And I just wanted to add that we've done comprehensive looks around the world. We're doing stuff in Taiwan right now. So we know how that's going. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies are moving stuff out of China to Taiwan. The labor rates are still competitive, but the government at the moment is more stable and predictable. So it's very important to look at all of those dynamics when you're looking at for a new location. Okay.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Bob said, a good example is a lot of companies we saw rushed into Myanmar, and then were surprised when there was further instability in that country. And while it may seem trite, any political risk analysis would have showed that the military reasserting itself there was something that was highly likely to happen. There are lots of opportunities around the world. As Bob said, we've done a number of studies in the Middle East. There's a lot of investment there that could make sense. But again, it comes with its own difficulties and having someone on the ground in each location you're trying to work with is imperative, and not just someone from your team who you think you know what you're doing, someone who really knows the local environment. Even though, for example, Bob and I have had tons of experience in China, when we need a lot of this work done in China to help facilitate the move with our clients, we rely on our Chinese staff because their ability to go in deal with some of the complexities and some of the cultural nuances is much greater. And we've done that in any other country where we're active. So do we know, what are our expectations for reshoring productivity capacity in North America?
I mean, again, that's based on what we talked about in the very beginning. First of all, what is the scope? What is your plan? What are you trying to do? It's very critical to get that done. And then saying, what are you trying to accomplish? And that includes, your future role notes of capacity. That's business planning. You have to do that. But again, it comes back to business planning and growth versus cost. What do you need once you get settled into a thought process of, let's use Mexico for a sec.
Yeah.
David, you're quite well versed on the cost and labor rates and all that in Mexico. It is slightly higher than China, but at the same time, when you take out all of the transportation costs, all the duty costs, and everything else that's involved, economically, it made sense. So several of our customers do it. Matter of fact, Mexico is booming right now, and it's becoming tighter and tighter to find locations with ready-built factories to lease and stuff like that. And the government down there is recognizing that. They're not pushing back because they want to take all they can get, but it's going to drive their costs up. That's the point. So, yeah, that's the short and narrow of it, I guess.
Yeah, and we would always talk when we talk about capacity and moving out of China. From our observations, we've seen people try to say, who is the next China? Who is the next China? Well, there really is no the next China. They have to be taken on an individual basis. A lot of people talk about, okay, the advantages to moving to Vietnam. Someone asked, you could see, how is supply chain maturity in Vietnam? And the short answer, it's okay. It's getting better constantly. There's a lot of investment going there. There's good reasons to go to Vietnam, but Vietnam still does not have the same level of maturity as China. It is rapidly building its infrastructure, but it's not there. And the fact is that it doesn't have the people to repeat what happened in China over the past 30 years. Like, the population of Vietnam, I think, is 130 million. It's a tenth the size. More companies are moving to Taiwan. Great location for a lot of reasons, but Taiwan can only accept so much before salaries start rising. We've seen it. Vietnam, a significant increase in salaries over the past 5-10 years, despite they're still much lower than China. And you had the advantage that you are close to the much more mature supply chain there. But these things do take time. And when we say de-risk and factory relocation, oftentimes we're not saying it's a wholesale leave China and go to Mexico or go somewhere else. It's maybe sometimes it makes the most sense to hedge your bets and have more than one location, fill different roles, because COVID taught a lot of companies that if you might be in a bad position if something happens in one of your key areas and now you can't get any product. And if you have multiple locations, you're hedging your risks if something happens in one of them. So yeah, that I think
one of the big things, Dave,
oh,
excuse me.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Is to consider the market you're trying to serve.
Yes.
Going to Vietnam when you're serving the Asian market makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the transportation costs are still high in Vietnam, and there's a challenge. And they do have port problems and issues and infrastructure issues over there that they're still dealing with as they grow. that to me is a big key. We have had several customers we've reopened or opened in China because they want to serve the China market. And so they're not going to leave, but they do have facilities outside of China that can service the rest of the Western market. And that's what they're doing. So as David mentioned, you may want to have two locations. The company we're moving to Canada and Mexico, they're going to stay in China because there is an Asian market, if you will, but it's also there's really still a price difference on really low cost, low grade parts or product. So they're being logical about it, and then one day they may pull it all out of China. But right now they have so much they buy in Asia, Vietnam included. Several of our sporting goods customers are like that. They're spread around, Taiwan, China, and Vietnam, but they're looking to move more and more out of China because of the risk that's there, and it's not just politically, it's financial and et cetera. That's what they're doing. So again, back to the beginning. What is the scope? What are you trying to achieve? Make sure you know what your current state is, and then I'll throw this one out. Develop a future state, and that will tell you your final scope. What could I be if I did something different? So just, you might want to even white paper the whole thing. Start from nothing and say, okay, what am I trying to do? And build it back up, including the whole value stream, supply versus to your clients, and especially internally.
Yeah. And I think that's, worth mentioning. We've, coming back to the idea of companies opening factories in China, we've had two examples of this. A Welsh company we worked with still produces in Wales, still produces for their primary European market, but there was a demand in China. And another company we've just started working with is a South African company, and they say they are losing sales to Chinese companies because they don't produce in China. So they're now looking to say, okay, how do we make our own factory in China to produce to this market? And personally, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because there are larger, we talk very much about North America, but Mexico is now a very big market to buy, and as its economy continues to grow, there are a lot of consumers there to purchase it. It's not just a place to produce for the American and Canadian markets. Similarly, China is a much bigger domestic market that companies are still trying to figure out how to best serve. So there are a lot of opportunities there. But what I think would be useful, we're trying to show everyone how complex the movement is. Let's bring up, we have a template. Yes, thank you. On that we use that shows a broad example of here's how we plan it, and here's how you should be thinking about these things as you do that. So I'm going to bring that up if you want to just give a quick understanding of these are things people should be thinking about as they're relocating.
Okay, this template was created by one of our staff members who's quite brilliant at doing this stuff, and so I'm going to plagiarize it a bit from him. But this is a template that we use with almost all our clients when it comes to planning a project move, a relocation, or a new factory, whatever. The first page here really is just an explanation of what the template is, what RASI is. RASI is really a key part of this, and we'll go to that sheet in a minute. Yep. But the RASI, again, is really having a project leader, cross-functional team, and then assigning who's responsible to get this step done, this critical step done, who's in the process of approving that step, who's contributing to that step, and who's receiving information on it and feedback. So it's really important that that's a critical stage in the whole project plan. It's getting your cross-functional team and then doing a RASI. Next one, David. You can show the RASI if it's there.
Yeah.
There's the RASI. So this gives you an idea. You've got your client, who's the customer. Here's the projects on the left side. The customer, in this particular case, it was CMC who was doing the project. It's MTG CMC, and then the plant. When we're talking about the plant, we're talking about where you're going to restart. So the customer could be in Europe, it could be in Africa, it could be in Canada, it could be in the US. And the factory you're starting up could be, again, in Canada, US, Mexico, it could be in Vietnam. But what you identified is a cross-functional team of people. And who, now you go down, you say who's accountable. You know, like the project award, if you stay at the top, the
Yeah, right
project
there.
award, right, is responsible for the CMC lead consultant to get it done and present it to the team. If you go through some of this, you got initiate, open point checklist. It may seem like a very small item, but it's a learning tool. You create this open point checklist and you put it in there. It's also a tracking tool. Who's got to get something done? So you're keeping control of the project as well as learning from the project. And now you have a history of what happened and what didn't happen. So you go to the next project or the next thing you want to do, you don't have to relearn everything. It's all there for you to see it. And that's what the RASI does. Now, if you go to the milestones, David,
Yes.
down below, don't
Oh,
tab 1.
tab 1. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so here are key milestone steps in a project that you identify. But again, it's the cross-functional team sitting down, planning. What are we doing? Where are we today? What do we want to look like tomorrow? And what are the key steps in getting it done? And this includes project approval, includes feasibility study, it can include critical plant preparation, which is really underestimated, plant preparation. I mean, power, how much power do you need? How much air do you need? How much water do you need? How much environmentals do you need? So this gets the key milestone parts out, and then you jump to the work package. And again, we're just skipping through this. Now you're talking with a little more detail about the project is awarded. Initially, the step here is the engagement. You move on to initiate an open point list, like I just mentioned, develop deviation matrix, and it goes on in detail. But every one of these points relates to the other tab on the spreadsheet. It's all interconnected. You change one, you got to change them all. The timing is the next one, which I think a lot of people might be interested in. And here is steps that got to be done. The milestones are in arrows, again, related to the milestone sheet before, related to the RASI before, related to the project plan. And this, if you go down that list, David, just roll it, look at the points, just keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And remember, I mentioned earlier, one client was moving a 1,200 person factory to another location. He was at the current location they were at, they had 2 buildings, 11 floors. They were moving it to one location with 4 floors, and they had 27 points on the move plan. And each one of these items, if you move to the left, David, move your cursor there. Here's your points that needs to be done. And each one of these will have their own little project plan as well. So it's not just this level. It's a level upon a level upon a level upon a level that all has to tie together. And that's why we mentioned early, you need people who understand how to manage a project. You need people who you have cross-functional teams. You need to involve more people than you think. And there's more planning involved than you believe to get this done properly. Simple things like, it's not simple. They're critical things. When you're tearing down the equipment, you need to itemize the asset. You need to say, it's a metal stamping press, for instance. Guys, it's a 20-ton metal stamping press. You need to, can I ship it like it is? Do I need to take it apart? If I take it apart, then you need a list of all the parts, and all the parts need to be identified. And you need to identify how I took it apart and how it needs to be put back together. Do I do that myself? Do I involve the supplier? who built the equipment? Do I bring the supply? If you do that, do I bring the supplier to the new location and they reset it up and get it ready? Those are just a myriad of items and details that need to be taken care of. And you need people who can ask the right questions to say, hey, do I need to put a pad in the floor? Do I need a special transformer for this? Safety concerns. Do I need lighting, stops and palm stops? What do I need to be qualified in North America or in Vietnam if you go there? So this is just a typical template sheet we use. We're currently using this on a few of our clients, and it really helps manage the projects. And I know everybody hates meetings. I do, especially. I think any meeting over 15 minutes is too long. But if you do this right, it's not coming in and you're saying, okay, we know this is complete. Tell me what your problems are, right? Because if everybody keeps their end up and keeps their data up, that's what you're dealing with. What do you need help on? What do I as the project manager and we as the management, what do we need to do to help you out here? Is it more money? Is it more time, more people, more understanding, more training, et cetera? And saying that in here, you would have training of new employees.
Yeah.
Not only on how to operate the equipment, but you got, standard operating procedure, you got work instructions, you got health and safety. Do you want them involved in Gemba Kaizen, for instance, and visual board management on the shop floor? All of that takes planning and time to set up and get done, and training, and lots of training.
And a few things I want to add to that quickly is have an honest understanding of what your team has and does not have. Because a good number of companies, we see this everywhere, but particularly areas in China, people go, I don't want to spend the money. My team are smart people, they can figure it out. And they are probably smart people and they can figure it out. But the commitment to do so and the costs that you're going to take as people do figure it out can be high. I liken it to the fact that anyone here who's an American can understand this. I can do my own taxes, but it will be longer, more painful, and I'm likely to make more mistakes than if I had someone who knows about this. And either that you bring out someone who's outside your company or bring someone in to the company to do this specific type work. Capable engineers might not be manufacturing experts. They're not always connected the same thing. So it is and the last thing, as Bob mentioned, like understanding people doing their job. There will be delays. There will be things that come up that are unexpected. Planning is essential, but rarely does anything go 100% according to plan. I was going to say, isn't that been your observation, Bob?
Oh, yeah. I mean, plans are great and you need them, but they have to be living plans.
Yes.
I mean, David, you're ex-military. You know more better than anyone else. What do they? We have the greatest battle plan in the world until the first shot is fired, right? Well, it happens. Things are going to go wrong, and that's why you need a cross-functional team to react, to make sure that you get it back on track. Unexpected, but the more planning you do, the less unexpected you have.
Yeah. Taking that military reference, Eisenhower famously said, plans end up being worthless, but planning is essential. And because again, you can come back to this, you can make adjustments, and things will come up that you didn't even consider. Similar, another client, a company, we did planning with them, and then not long after we started, it turned out that they didn't even know what kind of paint they used on their product. And no one had asked that question sooner in the process, and it came out. And then the process had to adjust. It turned out to be a bump in the road, not a major problem, but that is something that happens, and you have to adjust through it. Now, we are getting close to an hour, and while we're not quite following Bob's rule of this being no more than 15 minutes, we are respectful of everyone's time. What I'd like to do is give a last chance, open it up. Any final thoughts? We literally could be talking about this for hours, because there's so much that can be involved, and the situation can be different. So, we do have a question here. So Bob, I'll read this out to you. Just a comment. One of the biggest issues I have seen when a client intends to use their existing employees to plan for a new venture is that most of them already have full-time jobs and can't devote the time to meeting and planning a successful move and expansion. And this always causes delays and frustration.
Deb, you're absolutely correct. We have a sporting goods company that we're moving to 2 different locations with right now. And they so totally underestimated what their involvement had to be that they've now, a year later, have created a whole project team specifically to the move. So, and they had to backfill. So you are absolutely correct. And that's why I mentioned earlier, having a project manager who really understands how to do all these things that we're doing, with this planning sheets, et cetera, and not controlling, but guiding everyone else, has no other responsibility other than that is critical. So I agree with you, Deb.
Yeah, long and short of it is, you have to plan, and things are often more complicated than you imagine. Just even as a personal reference, I'm sure all of us have moved and then realized that, all the stuff in our house and all that is more complicated than there's a lot more to it than we thought. I know we've definitely had this circumstance. So what I'd like to do then is, I want to first of all thank everyone for being here. These are some great questions. We're going to see a lot more of these. Just so everyone knows, we will be sending a recorded version of this to everyone here on the list, everyone who signed up. And we are available, both Bob and I will include our contact information to speak with anyone about what questions you might have, something more specific to your industry. Because while in broad strokes, there are a lot of similarities. Manufacturing is manufacturing, depend if you're making plastic toys or jets. But there's just levels of complexity. There are details very specific to your company's needs, your what you're trying to do, that we can address further in a one-to-one conversation. So again, thank you everyone who joined, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Good. And any feedback you want to send back to David or I would appreciate it.
Yep.
We always try to improve these. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have case studies, we have all kinds of stuff, but we realize that if we started going into them, we're just going to run out of time so fast. So we just tried to answer the questions in an open forum, and we will answer all the questions online as well.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely. So thank you everyone so much, and have a great rest of your day, and happy Canada Day and 4th of July to those who apply to. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.